They criticize me for being scripturally blunt, direct, and firm on biblical principle. One writer commented on the message last night and was so upset because I criticized the conduct of America.
Gino Jennings was once a rising voice, known for his bold religious teachings and outspoken style. But recently, the landscape around him seems to be shifting dramatically. Is this the beginning of a downfall for a figure who once commanded attention across the Christian community? What caused this sudden change? Few anticipated how quickly things could unravel for Jennings, and some recent events suggest deeper issues at play. Today, we'll explore what's really happening behind the scenes and why the future may be more uncertain than it looks. Main issue emerging. Gino Jennings is facing a growing controversy that now appears far more serious than early rumors suggested. What began as scattered disputes among followers has developed into a wider crisis affecting both his ministry and public image. At the center are concerns about his leadership style, the direction of his teachings, and whether his approach has become too divisive to maintain unity. For Jennings, the issue goes beyond doctrine. It is also about trust. Some former associates have questioned how decisions were made inside the organization and claimed that certain leadership practices damaged relationships. While many details remain unclear, the steady buildup of dissatisfaction has weakened goodwill and raised difficult questions about accountability. Social media has made the situation harder to control. Online debates, rumors, and criticism continue to spread, keeping the controversy alive and widening the divide among supporters and skeptics. What might once have stayed within church circles is now being discussed publicly by a much larger audience. Jennings's confrontational public tone has also intensified concern. To some, his boldness reflects conviction and spiritual courage. To others, it now feels like a barrier to dialogue, healing, and cooperation. Critics argue that this rigid approach leaves little room for honest disagreement, creating the conditions for deeper conflict. Still, Jennings retains a loyal base that strongly defends him. These supporters believe his refusal to compromise is exactly what makes him powerful and trustworthy. That split between loyalty and concern makes the situation especially unstable. What triggered the turning point remains unclear, but the tensions surrounding Jennings have clearly reached a critical stage. His next response may determine whether the crisis leads to reform, division, or lasting damage. Despite the growing storm, Jennings has been mostly quiet on the escalating criticisms, and he seems to keep steering everything back toward his ministry and preaching. That choice might be strategic, yet it also makes you wonder if he's ready, or maybe even equipped, to deal with the hurdles now pushing in on him. When someone stays silent like this, it can land in different ways: strength or plain avoidance. Another piece of the puzzle is the wider climate around religious leadership scrutiny that Jennings is dealing with right now. More and more, leaders whose messages spark controversy have to juggle public backlash alongside legal realities. These days, organizations, media platforms, and audiences don't exactly give much room for missteps. Any mistake, or worse, any misconduct, can follow someone quickly and stick around for the long haul. Jennings's current troubles should be understood as part of that larger accountability landscape, where actions create consequences far beyond a personal or neighborhood scale. It's also worth pointing out that Jennings's personal style, where vehement biblical literalism meets sharp denunciations of opposing views, doesn't really leave much breathing space for error or for compromise. That, in turn, raises the stakes each time conflict shows up, because shifting or softening positions could cost him credibility with his base. Still, stubbornness might be the very fuel feeding the unrest now troubling his ministry. So, if the core problem is to be said plainly, it's about sustaining influence at a time when both internal strains and external pressures are piling up, while he's being pulled into questions of leadership integrity, community cohesion, and his public posture. Yet, understanding how Jennings reached this critical point requires looking back at the foundations of his rise and the reputation that preceded these difficulties. Historical background. Gino Jennings first gained major recognition after building the First Church of Our Lord Jesus Christ, a Pentecostal denomination known for strict doctrine, fiery preaching, and a strong call to holiness. His message appealed to people who wanted a return to what he presented as biblical purity, discipline, and moral seriousness. From the beginning, Jennings stood apart from more mainstream pastors because of his bold delivery, aggressive criticism of other religious groups, and refusal to soften his beliefs. His reputation grew quickly. To supporters, Jennings was a no-nonsense teacher who offered spiritual clarity in a confusing religious world. His confident authority helped him build a loyal following across different cities in the United States and beyond. Many followers were drawn to his directness, his sense of order, and his promise of truth without compromise. This strong identity gave his ministry momentum and made him a major figure in Pentecostal and online religious spaces, but his rise was never really free from controversy. Even early on, critics warned that Jennings's rhetoric could be rigid, exclusionary, and divisive. His public rebukes of other churches and preachers brought attention, but they also generated tension. Some religious observers wondered if his style really strengthened faith, or instead deepened a kind of separation inside the broader church community. Jennings, though, stayed firm, believing that strong correction was necessary to defend spiritual truth. As his ministry grew, media became one of his most powerful tools, honestly. Sermons, videos, books, and social media posts helped his message travel far beyond the pulpit. Online platforms introduced him to younger audiences and to people who felt dissatisfied with traditional churches. Still, that same visibility that helped him rise also made it easier to spread every statement, conflict, and controversy everywhere. Over time, the ministry's brought pressure along with it. Jennings had to keep his hardline identity while reaching a wider audience, and that balance created tension inside and outside the organization. His leadership depended not only on doctrine, but also on deep personal loyalty from followers who saw him as a defender of truth. This background helps explain why his current struggles feel so significant. Jennings's rise was built on charisma, discipline, media reach, and uncompromising conviction. But those same strengths also created vulnerabilities. When a ministry is centered so strongly around one voice, criticism of that leader can shake the entire community. Understanding this background shows that Jennings's present challenges did not appear suddenly. They are rooted in the very path that made him influential in the first place. How these factors interact with recent controversies gives a clearer picture of the present moment's gravity. With that context, the specific controversies that have recently emerged take on sharper meaning. Controversies and criticisms. In recent years, Gino Jennings has faced controversies that have placed his reputation under serious pressure. While he remains a powerful figure among loyal followers, critics and former supporters have raised concerns about his leadership style, public rhetoric, and the internal culture of his ministry. One major criticism centers on claims of authoritarian leadership. Former insiders have described an organization where decisions are made from the top down, dissent is discouraged, and those who question leadership risk being pushed aside. These allegations have raised concerns about accountability and possible abuses of power, especially in a ministry built around one dominant voice. Jennings has also drawn backlash for his harsh public attacks against other churches, pastors, and religious movements. His commitment to doctrinal purity has always been central to his identity, but critics argue that his tone has become increasingly personal and inflammatory. Instead of encouraging dialogue, these confrontations have deepened divisions and made cooperation with other religious communities more difficult. Questions about financial transparency have added another layer to the controversy. While no public legal action or formal audit has confirmed wrongdoing, Some former members and observers have pointed to a lack of openness about funds and organizational decisions. In an era when church finances are closely scrutinized, even the appearance of secrecy can fuel suspicion and weaken public trust. Jennings's response to criticism has often been combative. Rather than engaging concerns directly, he has frequently dismissed critics as enemies, false teachers, or people working against the truth. This approach strengthens support among his most devoted followers, but it also reinforces an us versus them mentality. For hesitant supporters, that response can make the ministry feel more isolated and less accountable. Social media has intensified the situation. YouTube, Facebook, and other platforms have turned private disagreements into public debates, with viral clips and heated comments spreading quickly. These online battles often overshadow the ministry's message and keep controversy at the center of public attention. There have also been notable departures from Jennings's circle, with some ministers and key figures leaving quietly, while others have expressed disappointment publicly. These exits have created an impression of instability and internal conflict. Critics further argue that Jennings's ministry can feel intolerant of different views or personal expression, especially for younger members seeking openness and dialogue. Despite all this, Jennings remains unapologetic and continues preaching with intensity. But the growing weight of criticism suggests that his leadership is facing one of its most serious tests yet. The ripple effects of these controversies are felt sharply among Jennings's followers and wider communities. Followers' reactions. The reaction among Gino Jennings's followers has been deeply divided. Many longtime supporters remain fiercely loyal, seeing the criticism against him as attacks from outsiders who do not understand his faith or respect his uncompromising message. To them, Jennings is a truth-teller who refuses to bend biblical principles for popularity. This loyalty creates a strong sense of identity among his defenders, and some dismiss negative reports as misinformation, exaggeration, or character assassination. But not everyone within his audience feels the same. Some believers have grown uneasy with the direction of the ministry. While they may still respect Jennings's teachings, they question whether the tone, controversies, and hardline approach still meet their spiritual needs. Some have quietly distanced themselves, while others have looked for churches with more moderate or inclusive messages. This slow erosion of support suggests that tension is building beneath the surface. Social media has made these divisions even more visible. Online, followers debate whether Jennings is standing firm in truth or becoming too harsh and divisive. His strongest supporters argue that compromise would weaken the ministry, especially in a world they see as increasingly hostile to traditional faith. Critics and concerned followers, however, call for reflection, accountability, and a softer approach to criticism. This split makes it a real challenge for Jennings's leadership, When the core people can't agree on doctrine, on the tone, and on authority, it just gets harder to hold on to unity. Some followers might get disappointed enough to form little separate circles, slip away quietly, or even speak out publicly. That kind of movement slowly dulls the image of a united ministry. The bond between Jennings and his audience still feels strong, but it's not exactly smooth anymore. There's some strain in it. Younger followers look especially torn. A lot of them respect Jennings's discipline and his scriptural focus, but at the same time, they want more open dialogue, more compassion, and more human connection. The generational differences in how people view authority, faith, and community are adding this extra pressure on the ministry to adjust. If that adjustment does not happen, Jennings could end up losing part of the next generation, and that would hurt more than people realize. Even so, Jennings keeps pulling in passionate support at live services and also online events. His dedicated core stays energized, giving the ministry momentum even while the controversy keeps running in the background. Those gatherings can make things look sturdy and intact, at least from the outside, even while quieter doubts continue to build elsewhere. For the folks who leave or criticize him publicly, the consequences can get genuinely painful. Former followers may meet backlash, face rejection, or get hit with accusations of betrayal from people they once treated like family. In the end, these reactions underline how leadership controversies can reshape whole faith communities. Jennings's future may depend on whether these tensions end in healing, meaningful reform, or instead in lasting division. Even as some followers wrestle with questions about their leader, the wider religious landscape is reacting to Jennings's challenges with a mixture of caution and reflection. Broader community impact. The controversies surrounding Gino Jennings have reached far beyond his own ministry. Their impact is being felt across parts of the African American church community, Pentecostal circles, and wider conversations about religious leadership. For many pastors and organizations, Jennings's situation has become a warning about what can happen when powerful charisma, strict authority, and public visibility collide. Within Pentecostal communities, his confrontational style has often stood in contrast to leaders who prioritize unity, cooperation, and bridge building. While Jennings's bold preaching has attracted loyal followers, his public disputes and sharp rhetoric have also deepened divisions. Instead of encouraging common ground, his approach has sometimes created friction between ministries that might otherwise work together. In the broader African American religious landscape, Jennings's ministry carries cultural weight. His messages have touched on morality, identity, discipline, and tradition, issues that matter deeply within many church communities. But as criticism grows, so does the debate over what kind of leadership best serves people in changing times. Should religious leaders hold firmly to tradition at all costs, or should they adapt their tone and methods to reach a wider, younger, and more diverse audience? Modern media has made this debate even larger. Because Jennings has a strong online presence, controversy does not remain local. Sermons, clips, arguments, and criticism can spread instantly to global audiences. That exposure can strengthen a ministry's influence, but it can also magnify mistakes. Jennings' story shows how digital ministry can build a platform quickly while also making every conflict harder to contain. Other ministers now face this delicate sort of challenge, and a bunch of them might not agree with Jennings's methods, yet they still try not to condemn him too hard, because that could easily alienate the people who support him. So instead, they're doing that balancing act, honest criticism, but also respectful dialogue, almost like they want to keep the conversation moving without turning it into something sharper. You can feel a growing desire inside faith communities to handle the issues, but without digging deeper into the polarization in the ground. There are also practical consequences, of course. Any public controversy can shake partnerships, funding, community trust, and even the everyday organizational support. Ministries that are somehow tied to contentious leaders may end up getting extra scrutiny, especially about financial governance and accountability. Those pressures can quietly throttle growth and, in turn, weaken long-term stability. For scholars and theologians, Jennings has turned into a sort of living case study for modern religious authority. His career shows the tension between charisma and accountability, tradition versus change, plus exclusivity leaning toward openness, depending on how you look at it. And honestly, his whole situation forces some important questions. How can faith leaders stay strong without becoming divisive? In the end, Jennings's controversies aren't only about one preacher. They kind of reveal a larger religious community wrestling with leadership, influence, accountability, and change. What happens next may shape not just his legacy, but also how future ministers lead in a world that's increasingly public and watching. The story of Gino Jennings remains highly charged and deeply impactful as his ministry's challenges resonate across personal faith and collective identity alike. Possible outcomes. Looking ahead, the future of Gino Jennings's ministry remains uncertain. What happens next may depend on how he responds to criticism, pressure, and changing expectations from both followers and outsiders. One possible path is reform. Jennings could choose to address concerns more openly, listen to dissenting voices, and rebuild trust inside his organization. That would require humility and a willingness to engage with people who disagree with him. If handled carefully, this could strengthen his ministry, restore credibility, and show that his leadership can adapt during difficult times. Another possibility is that Jennings doubles down on his hardline approach. This may energize his most loyal supporters, especially those who admire his uncompromising style. But it could also push away moderates, younger followers, and those hoping for a more open religious community. If that happens, divisions could deepen, and his influence may become more limited over time. Outside pressure could also help shape the ministry's future, like media scrutiny and community criticism, plus financial stress or even legal challenges could end up pushing for more transparency and accountability. In many cases, these pressures really end up testing whether a leader can adjust on the fly without losing control of the thing they built or tried to build. Jennings's public messaging is another huge piece. If he uses a more measured, conciliatory tone, that might open up space for dialogue and for some kind of healing too. But if he keeps leaning into a combative style, the same old conflicts may keep going, and the public mood could keep turning more negative over time. Demographics matter as well, probably more than people want to admit. Younger generations often expect leaders to show openness, be accountable, and demonstrate cultural awareness. If Jennings doesn't really connect with those expectations, his ministry could have a harder time staying strong long-term. Still, if he can find a way to bridge generational gaps, he may preserve relevance and bring back renewed interest. At the end, Jennings's legacy will likely come down to how he handles this moment. If he adapts, he might be remembered as someone who changed under pressure. If not, then the whole story could get defined by conflict, division, and a bunch of missed opportunities. Gino Jennings's ministry now faces serious challenges rooted in leadership, controversy, and growing community divisions. His next steps could determine not only the future of his influence, but also the legacy he leaves behind. If you found this breakdown insightful, please like and subscribe for more thoughtful stories on faith, culture, and public figures. And before you go, watch the next video shown on the screen. It may reveal another side of the story you didn't expect.